So, welcome back to another episode of Career Candour, the podcast where we dive into the real stories behind career journeys. No fluff, just honest insights and actionable advice. And today we have an absolute powerhouse joining us, Friska Wirya. So, Friska is a globally recognized thought leader in change management, digital transformation, and leadership. She's worked with some of the biggest names in mining, engineering, and technology, guiding organizations through complex transformations. She's a TEDx speaker, a best-selling author, and has been recognized as one of the top 50 global change management thought leaders. But what makes Friska truly stand out is her ability to turn resistance into resilience. She's led change initiatives for companies with thousands of employees across multiple continents, and today she's sharing the highs, the challenges, and the lessons learned along the way. With International Women's Day around the corner, we're also diving into what it means to be a woman leading transformation in male-dominated industries, how organizations can support female leaders, and what the future holds for women in business. So whether you're an aspiring leader, a change maker in your own right, or curious about what it takes to drive transformation at the highest level, this one's for you. Friska, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lee. Great to be here.
So today I want to cover off a few major topics with you, things that you're well known for as a thought leader. But one of the key concepts of the podcast is looking at individual career as well, personal journey, how you got there, because there's a lot of people out there that are bright, that are ambitious, but maybe lack that North Star. So I think unwrapping the stories can be really, really helpful and useful. People start to realize that you weren't always where you are now. There's been a journey there. So those pathways we find really intriguing.
Mm.
So to kick off, I mean, you've had a dynamic career across industries, from mining to technology to education. What is it that initially drew you to change management?
To be frank, it was one word: boredom. I was really bored. I was in general management consulting in Los Angeles at the time, and I came back to Australia after 4 years being away, and it wasn't challenging. I felt like every project was the same. It's just, new slide deck, different logo. It felt a little bit rinse and repeat. And I'm the type of person that likes diversity. I like to do different things, go to different places, and change. That's what drew me to change management in the first place. It started getting more airwaves, going into the mainstream, and I was really intrigued because it played to all my strengths: the interpersonal communication, the communicating with people from all different walks of life, knowing what emotional and logical levers to pull to drive a change in outcomes and behavior. And so I could not get a job in change because I didn't have the qualifications or the experience. Finally found someone that was willing to take a chance on me, and I took a 40% pay cut to start from nothing, start as a lowly shit-kicking change analyst, did all the different sorts of changes like M&As, digital transformation, culture change, etc., many different industries, as you pointed out. And that's really what helped me become an all-rounder and start to identify what sort of change do I want to be known for and do I want to specialize in. And in 7 short years, I was the youngest GM of change for the biggest gold mining company in the Southern Hemisphere.
Fantastic. I mean, looking back, was there a defining moment that really solidified your career in transformation and strategy?
I would say the change. Before I stepped into mining, I had a lot of experience in engineering. And I think my years at Worley that I spent were quite formative because that's when I was really exposed to people from different cultures. Like I spent a lot of time in India, stood up 3 delivery centers in Mumbai, Hyderabad, and Chennai. And yeah, that was really what galvanized and helped me ascend really fast. It's that global exposure, different sorts of projects, different sorts of changes, and combined with the fact that because it was, at the time, it was the second largest engineering company in the world. So we were doing remote work before it was a thing. So how do you develop trust and get people to change their behavior if they don't know you, if you've never met them? So that really made me kind of galvanize my influencing, stakeholder engagement, and rapport building skills.
Understood. I mean, we talk quite a lot on our newsletter on LinkedIn around the cultural nuance, and like you said, depending on where you are, there's different
Mm,
ways of doing business, different expectations, different levels of need for trust as well. I think certain societies, certain countries, they like to operate based on competency. Others, you need more trust before anything really
mm.
happens. I mean, how have you found that work across multiple continents in just really shaping your approach to change and leadership?
So, in countries where it's really important to build trust before engaging with people there, and I know it's frustrating, but being based in Asia, trust does take a long time to build. What I've learned is if you don't have the luxury of that, you need someone who is trusted by them, who is willing to advocate and sponsor you. So, I don't know if you've heard the concept of the first follower. So there's a video that's gone viral many times. It's a leadership lesson. It's about this guy at a music festival, shirtless, just dancing like he's been electrocuted, to be frank. And he's dancing all by himself for a fair chunk of time. And then finally, the first follower joins in. And then after the first follower, then the second, then the third. And before you know it, everybody's gyrating in his crazy dancing way. My point is, there's a underrated form of leadership, and it's the first follower principle. So
Mm.
find out who can be the first follower to you, because that person lends credibility and gravitas, and that person will help entice the second and the third follower. And once you have the second and the third, you're not some crazy loony dancing in the corner by yourself. It legitimizes the change. So that's what I had to
Mm.
learn. I had to learn how to cast my net wider and how to build rapport with people who are respected by those people that I want them to trust me.
Interesting concept. So it leans into things like inherited trust, the network effect as well.
Yeah.
So that a first follower, first adopter
Yep.
is pretty critical.
Mm.
Interesting. I mean, are there any personal habits or routines, that you'd be open to share that have really helped you to stay at the top of your field?
I never stop sharpening the saw, whether it's doing on my own structured training or learning, or making it a point to catch up with someone new every single month. Someone always offers me a different perspective and adds to my worldview. So I would say what's helped me stay at the top of my game is that be insanely curious. And I prefer curiosity over contempt. If someone does something, you're not sure why, and don't misconstrue it instantly as negative, because you don't know what they're going through. And that's really helped me when I'm trying to change people's behaviors that have often been ingrained for decades.
Yeah, I mean, just looking back at a few of the podcasts that we've been recording recently, it's amazing how often curiosity comes up as a key trait, a key strength. And it's one of the common threads that I found amongst the people that we're speaking to and success
Mm.
in business. I mean, looking back now, because, in retrospect, in hindsight, we know a lot more now than we did when we started out.
Mm.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self at the start of your career, knowing what you do know now, what would it be?
It would be there's no point doing good work if no one knows about it. So I was very awkward. Like, I didn't want to big note myself. I didn't want to talk about my accomplishments. People always say, oh, you have to be a team player and blah, blah, blah. So I felt that I dimmed my light a lot more at the beginning of my career.
Hmm.
But yeah, if I would have that time over again, it's no one's going to sing your praises better than you. So be comfortable with that, because if you're not confident and you can't articulate your value add, you're never going to get a sponsor or a mentor or someone that will advocate for you.
Understood. So let's move on to navigating change and leadership, which is something that you're well known for. You've written books on as well, best-selling books, as well. So let's talk about transformation in large organizations. And you've worked in this space across universities, mining companies, consulting firms, and you hinted on this in one of your previous replies. But if you were to really consolidate what the biggest challenge is in driving change at a global scale, what would you say that is?
Number one, first or foremost, leadership. A lot of them don't know what it means to lead change. It's not just speaking at a town hall. It's not just signing off on budget. It's not just shooting yet another corporate video. You actually need to roll up your sleeves and manage resistance. You need to develop support for the cause. You need to make sure, use that network that you've got to drive adoption. It's very much a contact sport. Just because I'm a change professional doesn't mean I do everything. A leader, actually, shock horror, has to do a lot of things to get people on board with a change. And also what I've noticed in big global organizations is that the people that are tasked with leading big change initiatives, often they just rely on who's the most senior person in the room.
Mm.
Or, if it's an IT change, oh, then it's the CIO. But it should be who can be the best change leader, because a leader has multiple roles during change. They need to be a coach, they need to be a liaison, they need to be an advocate, they need to be a resistance manager, and lastly, they need to be a communicator. If they can't do those 5 things, it doesn't matter how senior they are or how big their team is, they shouldn't be the ones that are leading this change effort. So that's
Mm.
number one. Number two is communication, or rather lack thereof. The amount of fights I've had with the corporate internal comms police in big organizations, I can't lose count. Like, they don't understand how to use words, visuals, messaging in a way to get people to stop what they're doing and want to adopt the new way that I'm advocating for. So there's too much T's and C's, too much red tape, too many rules to help get the cut through. Because when you consider, believe it or not, our attention spans are 2.5 times less than pre-pandemic levels. So this means we can't keep communicating the same way. We can't keep doing the same old boring presentations, the same old town halls. People switch off. But often, being a big corporate, yes, I know, I understand you need policies, you need guidelines, etc. But they're often a handbrake that can kill off any momentum for a change.
Yeah, I mean, some of these change projects as well, I look at how long term they are because of how complex they are. It's not, people often underestimate what's involved. When you talk digital transformation, for example, they just think about the technology side when it's always a human sport. So it's a human transformation that's the key. And one of the phrases that I've heard come up a few times in these larger, longer term complex transformations is a term called change fatigue. How do you keep teams engaged and motivated during these prolonged transformations?
A few things. Whether you're fully remote or whether you're in the office, it's important to have some sort of war room that reminds you why you're doing this in the first place. Like, for example, when I was at WA Police, so WA Police are the world's single largest policing jurisdiction. There's so many of them. At that time, I think there were about 7,500 police officers, and it was a very long digital transformation project that we were on. But the war room that we were in was covered, one wall was covered, with the reasons why we're doing this. It showed, really emotive, visceral photos of what this enabled us to do. Because it wasn't a piece of technology. It was keeping the lives safe of 1.2 million Western Australians. So it had a lot of hero images. That's one thing. Number two is turn the boring, mundane things, the routine things that you have to do as a team, into rituals. And, here's an example. Japan, right? They love their teas. They love their tea ceremonies. And even the most basic tea ceremony takes 45 minutes. The full-blown one takes 4 hours. So what's something special that you do every day that you can turn into a ritual with your team? Because the difference between a ritual and a routine, it's the mindset, it's the intention, it's being present. So think about what that is for your team. And last but not least, people love seeing that they're progressing. So what are some visual markers or milestones that you can celebrate as a team together?
Mm. So it sounds like it should be fairly smooth sailing, but I'm sure it's not always the case. I know a lot of times people approach change with caution. Sometimes they see it as a threat to the status quo or even their existing role and their
Always.
livelihood
Yes.
as well. So you talk about morphing resistance into resilience. So what is your go-to strategy for overcoming resistance to change?
First and foremost, find out where they're resisting in the first place. Even really positive change that benefits everyone, if it's not landed correctly, people will be scared out of their minds. And so people resist change because they fear losing something. that the status quo is giving them. And it's one of these 6 Ps. The first, obviously, position. Am I out of a job? Number 2 is pay. Is it going to be harder for me to get my bonus? Is it reducing? I'm not sure. Number 3 is performance. So they've been really amazing at this particular application. It's been completely scrapped with something new. They don't want to look stupid. And then you have protection. So this is very common in the instances of a operating model redesign or a restructure. Maybe this person's underperformance will be uncovered. And then we have prestige. So you will have no idea how emotional people get from losing their car park, losing an office. Why? It hits them in their prestige button. So this is what gives them their sense of self-worth at work. So if you know which one of those 6 Ps is driving this person's really aggressive response to a change, you'll know what to say and how to say it and how to manage it. But often we do not give enough time and effort into uncovering which of these 6 Ps is driving the symptoms of the behavior. Usually, because I often hear it in the workplace, like, oh, that guy's just always been difficult, or yeah, he she's always done it this way, and blah blah blah. And then they try to steamroll over that person, which makes them dig their heels even more. But if we took the time to empathize, to really understand what they're scared of losing, we would know how to handle this situation. So that's what I mean. So instead of because resistance is pushback, right? So so we want to turn that pushback into them pulling us forward, into them inviting us into their working experience.
Understood. And one thing we talk about a lot in sales is storytelling. And I reference
Yes.
sales because it's a space that I know well, and we incorporate it around our own content strategy and our sort of mission statements when we speak to clients. But I'm sure storytelling isn't something that is just unique to sales. What role does storytelling play when it comes to driving successful change and transformation projects?
Storytelling is relevant no matter what degree you've got, what industry you're in, or what you're trying to do, because humans are hardwired for story because we yearn for connection and meaning. So if you don't have a compelling story, no one's ever going to adopt your change. So I'm a huge believer in storytelling. It's a skill that everybody should be investing in. So I'll give you an example. When I was at Newcrest, the way the CIO's team would ask for budget from the leadership team was an Excel spreadsheet. Like, here's the number, here's what it's called, here's how much it'll cost. Needless to say, support was nearly zero. So I changed the way they told their story and used visuals. I used language and images that the senior leadership team would understand, and that is the value creation process of mining, right from the digging, the excavation, to the drilling and the leaching and blah blah blah, but then linking the request for budget to pivotal moments in that story. From then, everything changed. It's because they didn't understand the complete picture and the full story.
Understood. Understood. I think that kind of leads as well into the next section, which is looking a bit more at the industry specific insights, because you've worked across different fields, and I guess there are unique challenges specific to industries as well as individual organizations in there. So you mentioned there that you work with Newcrest. I think also you have done some work with BHP as well
Rio
previously.
Tinto. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
contracted to BHP and Rio
Yeah.
Tinto.
I mean, a big agenda in mining in recent years has been digital transformation. I mean, how has that
Yes.
reshaped how mining companies operate?
So there's a few things. For example, gold, right? Gold has a very high price at the moment. And so, a lot of these operators want to make money while the sun's shining. So they're looking for any extra advantage they can take to get more out of the ground. So that's one thing. Number 2 is that for these precious metals that are now in demand because of solar panels or electric vehicles like nickel, etc. So these metals are hard to get. We're having to mine deeper, and it's getting more expensive. And what happens? The deeper you go, the more technology you need, the more powerful drills you need. But then what happens also when you get bigger machinery and more powerful machinery, your greenhouse gases go up. So, companies are having to exert more effort, financial effort, technological effort, cultural effort to get the same, if not more, results. However, the consumer's expectations of them to be a socially responsible corporate citizen are higher than ever. So that's why they look to adopt technology more and more to make this possible.
Yeah, and I think you rightly pointed out there things like ESG and sustainability are huge in the mining industry. I mean, What role has change management played in making these initiatives stick?
I would say the sad thing is it's been minimal. Been minimal. Like I talk to other people who are in change in those sectors, and very rarely are they on a sustainability initiative. And that's, I think, the missing opportunity here to make it stick. Guess what? It doesn't stick automatically by itself. There needs to be reinforcement activities. You need to constantly remind people of the story behind why they're doing this. You need to showcase the benefits of the change. You need to encourage other areas to adopt, and you have to constantly find opportunities for improvement. And if no one's got
Mm,
their eyes on the prize, when I say the prize, I mean the change, like how to improve it, how to get more people to it, how to increase people's proficiency, how to use their confidence to now whet the appetite for even more change that will improve sustainability. So I think change management hasn't had a central role in anything related to ESG and sustainability. And if it did, it'd be a lot more, those initiatives would be a lot more successful. A lot of those initiatives are still regarded as PR spin, to be frank,
mm.
in those sectors.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, what you've built in terms of an individual consulting business, and I think it gives you a unique perspective because you are seeing different landscapes versus being hardwired into the ways and culture of a single company.
Mm, mm.
I bet there are many people out there, people listening to this, people that have bought your book that, would love to do something similar to what you've done in building your own brand and consulting practice.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a lot harder than it looks for people who are on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
I know myself being on a similar path
Yeah.
for the past 18 months or so. I mean, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned from shifting from that corporate world to running your own business in consulting?
I think for me specifically, like change management is such a misunderstood or poorly understood service that makes it doubly hard. So I would say would be to do your homework, really zero in on who you're trying to engage, like who's the person that hires you, because the person that hires you sometimes is not the person that pays your invoice. So
Mm,
make sure you are differentiating yourself and communicating in a way that pulls in the person that you want to pull in, and that doesn't happen overnight. If you're not great at communicating, I would say don't be shy and invest either in building your own skills or getting an expert in, because when it comes to building your own practice and you want to be seen as a thought leader and a top 50 this and win all these awards. Like that matters. How you
mm.
articulate yourself matters, because first impressions are made in less than 2 seconds and they rarely change afterwards. So I would say before launching anything, do your homework to make sure it's polished, it's perfect, it truly represents you, you've tested it on people, and then you go out to the world.
So would you say that's what sets a great consultant apart from a good one?
I'd say I'd add more than that. A great consultant versus a good one. There's lots of good consultants, but they not haven't got any real world experience. Like
Mm,
I don't want to bash the big four, but I will. But I will. They've got armies of, fresh graduates that are good consultants. But have
mm.
they actually done it in real life? Have they had their hands on the wheel? Do they understand the pressure that these executives are under? No, they do not. And that's what differentiates a great consultant from a good one, because we're not just talking shit. We're not just talking about theories. We've actually done it. We've been where you are. We know what works and what doesn't. And this is what our offer is to you.
And I think the interesting thing about the world and the world of work is that it's constantly evolving. It's very different today than it is 5 years ago.
Yep,
Even
100%.
the pandemic obviously contributed greatly to that, but I mean, the world is constantly moving, and if you don't evolve, then you can get left behind very easily. You're known for your work in speaking, act as an educator as well. I mean, what's one skill you think that professionals need to develop to stay relevant in the future of work?
No matter how digitized or remote we become, you cannot get very far in life without the ability to know how to make a group of disparate individuals come together and perform as a team. So I would say that relatability, being a connector, there's no MBA courses that will teach you that. Like it's something you need to hone yourself, and that will just
Mm,
come in time. And to those people that think, oh, I'm just not that sort of person, or, I wasn't blessed with that particular skill set. So any skill can be learned. It's just a matter of how bad do you want it? How disciplined are you to build it? So very early in my career, so I'm a bit of background, I'm an only child, was ping-ponged around aunties, uncles, grandparents when I was growing up. And because of that, I was very awkward as a child, and I didn't know how to just have a regular conversation with people. And I was very ambitious, and I knew to be able to speak with people of all levels, I need to be comfortable and I need to be confident. So because I didn't have those skills, I went to get those skills. Where did I go? I went to Tiffany because I wanted to be able to talk to ultra high net worths with confidence, put them at ease. I wanted to seem natural. And the first few months I was very awkward, but you do anything for the first time, you're terrible at it. Whether it's skiing, whether it's driving, whatever it is, it's going to be bad the first time. But the key is to remember that every expert started as an amateur. And if you don't keep sharpening that skill, then it's never going to get good enough. So no matter where your starting point is, just remember that is not your ending point.
Yeah, I think risk or risk aversion is something that sometimes holds people back. And I think different cultures see it in different ways as well. One trend that I do see is that many professionals, they fear taking risks in their career, whether
Yeah.
that's early career or even later on as well. I think there's an
Mm.
element of losing face, which as an outsider, but living in Asian culture for the past 16 years seems to be quite high on the list of things that you don't want to happen. But if there are people listening who are interested in making a career pivot, I mean, what's your advice on how you can approach a career pivot with confidence? Because you've been there, done that as well. So how do you do it?
So first of all, know what you're pivoting to. Like, if you don't have an ideal picture of where you want to be or who you want to emulate, how are you supposed to know which direction to go in? That's the first one. Number two is be realistic. Some people want to make $10 million a year. That's great, but that's not possible for a certain number, for a lot of careers. Maybe you're more suited to an entrepreneur route. So I think find out where you want to go, who you want to emulate. Number two is be realistic about the resources that it will take to get there. And number three is really think about your lifestyle. Like find out what you need, because even if you have an amazing career, like for example, vets, right? Vets don't get paid very well. Most of the vets that I've met do not give a shit about that because they're doing it for the love of the animals. So really find out what's your biggest driver. Is it, do you want to be like crazy rich, or do you have a burning heart and you want to save the oceans or plant more trees? So find out what it is. And last but not least is it's never too late to pivot, right? When you consider KFC man Colonel Sanders, I think he made his first million at 63. Like Vera Wang, very famous fashion designer, designed her first dress at 50. So there's
Mm.
never such a thing as too late. Yeah, it's only too late when you stop trying.
I saw a piece this morning, actually, which is sort of on that point, which is Warren Buffett. So 99% of the wealth that he's accumulated has been accumulated after he turned 53 or 56. Right.
Mm,
So
yep.
people don't realize that it's never too late to start. I'd love to give you a chance here to get a plug in for your book. I've read the first one. I haven't read the second one yet, but the first one, The Future Fit Organization, was a fantastic read for me and for anyone who is interested in transformation. I know you've updated that or created a second book, which is The Future Fit Asian
Correct.
Organization.
Correct. Yep.
So if an aspiring professional is interested in your book, if they haven't had the chance to read it yet, what would be one key lesson, one key takeaway from your first or your second book?
So they're two very different books. The first one is really a blueprint for anyone in charge of transformation or change in a large organization. The second one dives deep into the Asian culture. We're very traditional, usually less conservative. It's usually more conservative, less creative, and very much into the collective. So if you know that, how do you work with these Asian traits instead of against them. So how do you leverage them to your advantage to drive innovation and growth? And so for the first book, I would say the premise in one line, the key message would be the tool is only as powerful as the people who use it. So it's about how to get those people on board. The third one would be, like, you've heard of the concept of a bamboo network. I'm sure everybody has. Like in Asia, it's a thing. It's who you know, etc., etc. And bamboo itself is a very special material because it's one of the most hardest woods around. Like it builds bridges, it builds homes, here in Bali. But yet it's also the most flexible. So it does bend to the point where you think it will snap off, but it doesn't. So it's really, how do you be like bamboo in Asia? How do you know when to bend and in what direction? And how do you know when to stay strong and firm? Because that's going to get you the change that you want to see in your organization.
Great point. I'd like to move on now to something I know you're very passionate about, Friska, which is women in the workplace. And International Women's Day is just around the corner. So what's interesting, some of the industries that you talked about earlier that you've worked in, things like mining, construction, engineering, these are traditionally male-dominated industries. I mean, what challenges did you face as a woman in leadership, and how did you overcome them?
The challenges is obviously everything is geared towards rewarding typical traditional male behavior. So I'm introverted by background, and the number of times like people would say, you need to speak up more in meetings, you need to speak. It's like, and, my other male counterparts were just blurting out the bleedingly obvious, and they were being patted on the back like, they just invented color TVs, for God's sake. So I would say number one is the entire system is rigged against traditionally female. So I'm not going to be in a meeting, loud and proud, just talking just because I like the sound of my own voice. So yeah, there's a systemic thing. The second challenge that I faced being the only woman in leadership is that because there were not enough women, it became very catty. It was very, very bitchy, and I've still got scars from all the stab wounds in my back. And I had a worse experience with women than I did with men, actually. They were incredibly unsupportive. And when I got a role really fast after being in the business only a few months, it was a weird response. People were either kissing my ass or they were bitching about me behind my back. So I think until we get more women in leadership positions that instead of pulling up the ladder from underneath them, they actually open the door wider for other women to go through, that's going to be, unfortunately, still exist because it's a scarcity mentality. People think, oh, because she's there, she's taken away my spot. But we have so far to go until we get gender equity. Like if we continue at the pace that we are traveling now, it's going to take 133 years. That is insane because the entire internet was built in 40 years, the smartphone was built in 50 years, and the Eiffel Tower was built in 2 years. But getting equal men and women, somehow that's beyond us.
I mean, I know you've spoken at UN Women, women in leadership, women in construction and energy. Um, so you've got this vision about where things should get to or where they can get to. So what are some practical steps? We know what's wrong, we can see what's wrong, but what are practical steps that organizations can actually take to support, to empower, and to retain female talent in leadership roles?
Okay, to retain female talent, that's more easier and obvious to me. A lot of females drop out as they ascend because they're having babies. They've got childcare responsibilities, etc., etc. So we need to do something about that. Number two is that to support women, you can't just say you support them, like how? Whether it's mentoring, whether it's coaching, and it needs to be a different mechanism of support to a man, for example. Currently, there's no differentiation. The third is how to empower women. Women are empowered when they are supported and sponsored to be at the top. So regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, if you're in a leadership position and you want to empower the next generation of women, use your credibility, use your gravitas, use your network, advocate for them. That's what it will take. And I think before we even get to that, especially in those sectors that I've worked in, they can't even attract women. And like something so basic, because what was that lady's book? something Perez. She wrote a really good book. It's a data-driven analysis of the systemic barriers against women. And it showed a before and after of a job ad. And they just changed like 2 words in the job ad. I think one was pressure and the other, I can't remember what the other one was. Anyway, long story short, the number of women applying increased by 5-fold. So when they just simply substituted a traditionally aggressive masculine word out for something more neutral, women opted in. But how many times does HR just literally cut and paste the job ad into LinkedIn? Do they even think what people may be feeling when they read this job ad? I would say no. So before we've been thinking about supporting, empowering, retaining, we need to get women first. And so to get them, you have to attract them and you have to review how you're doing that.
Great. I mean, one thing that I've had feedback on from a few women that have made it or are on the path to making a real impact is this concept of imposter syndrome. And no, I know it's not something specific only to women. It can be anyone who's in leaderships who are in premium
Yep.
companies or brands that they feel maybe are above their station. Do you think this plays a role? And is there any advice that you'd give to aspiring female leaders who want to break through that glass ceiling?
There's a really popular phrase which I hate, and it's fake it till you make it. And this lends itself to imposter syndrome. So I would want to reframe that. So my take on that is work it till you become it. Work it till you become it. So you're only an imposter if you haven't done it before or if you don't feel you're worthy. But if you're not scared of putting in the hard yards, then you will become it. And so if you want to be, top 10 this, top 50 that, flying all around, speaking conferences, etc., you need to do the work. Yeah.
Got it. And just as a final question, Friska, final question for today. Let's talk about the future. So looking ahead, how do you see the role of women in corporate leadership, entrepreneurship, and change management evolving over the next decade or so?
If you asked me a few months ago, I would have a more optimistic answer. But we've seen, so many corporates roll back their DI programs. I mean, Trump's blamed diversity. For God's sake. So I'm not sure, to be frank. And a few months ago, I was interviewed for Lawyers Weekly about the report that was released by the Australian Discrimination Commissioner. So it was about Rio Tinto, and it showed they've gone backwards too. Like the support for DI and women in general, gone backwards, and they've rolled back. So my answer is I'm not optimistic until the people that are in power actually recognize it and value it.
Where would you like it to be then? What do you think it should look like in 10 years if you take the Trump politics out of it?
Just to have more women. Let's start with just having more. Like I spoke at the ASEAN Marketing Summit, what is it now, 3 months ago? 0 women, 0 country managers. Every single person was a male. And no one seemed to have a problem with that. I was like, am I missing something here? Yeah. And when you look at, we're in Indonesia, you look at the conferences around town, like, oh my God, if I see another conference, I think I'm going to poke my eye out with a blunt object. There's always, 9 blokes, 1 woman. So then there needs to be more of us. And I want to say, look, it's not just on the conference organizer, because, my podcast, Future with Friska, that talks about, inspiring leaders or interesting organizations doing amazing stuff. And I have had 0 success getting women to come on my podcast. I've asked them. They shy away. They say, who would want to hear from me? So I think there's 2 sides of the story. Yes, we need to do better at highlighting, championing more women into the spotlight. And second, women need to start working a bit more, because then they will become it. Because right now they don't feel like they've earned that spot.
Well, look, just to wrap things up then, Friska, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your journey, and your wisdom with us. I think from navigating change in some of the world's biggest industries to breaking barriers for women in leadership, there's so much to take away from this episode. If you're listening and you're feeling inspired, make sure to check out Friska's book, The Future Fit Organization, and her second book, The Future Fit Asia Organization, and follow her on LinkedIn. She's always sharing gold when it comes to leadership, transformation, and career growth perspectives. And if this episode resonated with you, do us a favor, share it with a friend, tag us on social media, and let us know your biggest takeaway. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw career insights on Career Candour. Until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep chasing the career you love. See you in the next episode.
Thanks for having me.